your own experience where you were abducted temporarily to a spaceship and you were prodded.
To a little room. I didn't see any spaceship. I still haven't ever seen one.
But what about this feeling of discomfort when you woke up the following morning after having this experience?
It was very disturbing and confusing. And there was also a lot of pain in the side of my head where they'd put a needle into my head. Then I had a brain scan, and there's a mark inside my brain at the point where the needle went in. So what are you to make of a thing like that?
Generation X Paranormal.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. So this next episode, there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of what I call gold stamps, or just, those things that just define a particular type of paranormal. This one kind of does that, I think, for UFO and ufology. And what we're talking about this week is the Hudson Valley UFO incidences. And we're going to start that off with kind of a historical background, but it is still very active, and we're going to cover that a little bit too afterwards. But, just kind of giving you a heads up. So, we'll just go ahead and kick it off and kind of get started because there's a lot to cover. So in between New Year's Eve in 1982 through 1986, there were more than 5,000 residents that claimed that they saw several lights in the sky over New York's Hudson River Valley. The Hudson Valley is situated an hour north of New York City and is home to upscale professionals, retirees, and other people that you wouldn't normally come forward believing in UFOs. People celebrated New Year's Eve that night in 1982 and saw an unusual aircraft in the sky. They stated it was as large as a commercial jet, and in a V shape, moving slowly, and it made no sound. That's important to remember. The craft was triangular, almost like a boomerang, and it flew very low over the community. It was photographed and videotaped by hundreds of residents. People driving in their vehicles pulled off to the side of the road to find a phone so they could call home because they thought there was an invasion. An invasion was taking place. So obviously they didn't have the cell phones back then, so nope. They had to find a place to call. Over the next 3 years, officials received over thousands of reports from eyewitnesses who claimed to see the same V-shaped craft. So it wasn't like it was just that particular incident. Mm-mm. On March 26th, in 1983, a front-page story in the Westchester Rockland Daily Item proclaimed that hundreds claimed to have seen the UFO. Hundreds. After reports in the article, author Philip, I'm hoping I'm going to say this right, Imbrogno, investigated the Hudson Valley on behalf of the Center for UFO Studies, which was founded by J. Allen Hynek after his work with the Blue Book Project. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's pretty important. I'm going to explain that to you here. Project Blue Book, I should say, was a code name for the study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force. I'm going to repeat that because that's pretty important. It's not something to gloss over. Project Blue Book, which I'm sure we may bring up sometime in another episode. Mm-hmm. Project Blue Book was a code name for the study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force. And that ran from March of 1952 to its termination on December 17th of 1969. So, Imbrogno spent 3 months conducting hundreds of interviews with residents and even witnessed this V-shaped craft himself. He stated that the object was the size of a football field, hovered at times and would project a beam of white light. He ended up seeing the object, I think, 3 different times during his investigations. And it was during these investigations that he noted something really interesting. The reports not only were about the craft in the sky, but also strange sounds coming from deep below the ground. So that's pretty different from what you would know from from a classic UFO type situation. The locals in the 80s used to hear things come up from the underground, and they weren't sure what it was, but they thought there was some kind of military alien base below ground. That's pretty scary to think about. They later documented the investigations in a book called Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO Sightings, and it was authored by Dr. Hynek, as we said, and Philip Imbrogno with the help of Bob Pratt. So that's kind of a short runway of some of the historical background. We're going to cover a lot more, but at least that gives you an idea of kind of when it started. My guess is it probably had started before that, but that's probably the first time it either was noticed or at least reported.
Yeah.
So, but Nicole, if you want to kind of bring us into some of these sightings.
So there's a lot here.
Yeah.
So I try to just focus on some of the main ones that most people know about.
Right.
So we'll just get into it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So the UFO was not seen just over the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Okay. But as far east as New Haven, Connecticut, and as far north as Brookfield, Connecticut.
Okay.
Okay. While most reports describe the UFO moving at a very slow speed, hovering, or turning slowly like a wheel, a few reports describe the object as suddenly zooming away at like high speeds or just disappearing.
Okay.
In some accounts, the shape varied so that the lights appeared as more as of like a circle than a V, but often the color and the arrangement of the lights changed as the viewers watched. So in a few cases, reports arrived that put the object at two distant locations at the same time.
Okay.
Suggesting that there might be more than one of them.
Sure. I mean, that would
Possibly.
kind of make sense, I would think, but yeah.
The object also seemed to be interested in bodies of water. One observer watched the UFO over Croton, I hope I'm pronouncing that right,
I think you are.
Falls Reservoir, where it seemed to use a red beam to probe the surface. So like it was almost looking for something.
Yeah, that's real weird. You know, you hear about these things and like, it makes me think of Cocoon. You remember the movie Cocoon where,
Yeah.
the craft kind of went over and it put beams of light to look for its people. Anyway, kind of jumping off, but yeah, that's interesting.
So on March 17th, 1983, so this is after the New Year's Eve thing, so this is a whole year
Right.
after. Okay, this man named Dennis Sant, he says he witnessed the UFO at his home in Brewster, New York. And this is a quote from him.
Okay.
He says, "It was a very large object. The structure of it was very dark gray, metallic, almost girder type looking. The object seemed to be very silent. The lights were iridescent, bright. They stood out in the sky and three-dimensional. It looked like a city of lights. It just hung in the sky, all brilliant colors. We followed the object around to the backyard, and at that point, a feeling of fright came upon me. Thoughts started to flood my mind. Thoughts of the craft touching ground. Thoughts of an encounter with an alien being. Thoughts of being abducted. All types of fearful thoughts started to enter into my mind."
Jeez.
Of course, that's probably what most of us would be.
Yeah.
Basically, he's describing his mind racing. Like,
Well, yeah.
what if all this stuff happens?
That's pretty scary, even in 1982, you know?
Yeah. And then a few miles away on Interstate 84, the craft hovered overhead.
Okay.
Okay. And then this is a few days later, so March 24th of 1983.
Okay.
Officer Andy Sadoff of Newcastle was a policeman on routine patrol and witnessed the craft.
Okay. So there's a government official.
Mm-hmm. And his quote is, "I was working a 4 p.m. to midnight tour and assigned to set up some radar to look for speeding cars, and I looked up into the sky and saw a series of lights. And at first I thought it was a plane. It was quite at a distance, quite far away, but it was really quite large. As I recall, there were mostly white lights, but there were green lights also. It was alternating green and white lights. It approached my vehicle and it stopped, and it seemed to hover. And I'm looking at this thing thinking, what is it? I wasn't afraid. I was just amazed. I was in awe of it. I didn't know what it was. The only thing that I recall the most is I was amazed that there was no noise. There was no humming. There was no engine. There was no sound. It was absolutely silent."
Wow. I mean, you got to think. So you're an officer out on patrol, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially at night, you know, if you're a younger cop, maybe like a beat cop, maybe you haven't been on the force long, but still, you'd probably have really keen observation capabilities, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's his job.
Yeah, he's
you
still
know?
been trained.
So he's already said and stated that it had no sound. That's pretty important for a lot of the stuff we're about to talk about. But you know, yeah, that's impressive.
So about the same time this is going on with him, there's a guy named Ed Burns who was a computer engineer and senior manager for IBM.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That hits close to home.
He was driving home on the Taconic Parkway, which is it was about 10 miles north of this officer's location.
Okay.
Okay. And his quote, what he said was, "Out of nowhere, I got a lot of static on the radio. I thought maybe I was on the wrong number. And then I went over to turn the dial again, and that's when I looked up and saw this craft. It was a triangular ship, and the back had to be as large as a football field at least. And there was no noise. I'm not into astronomy, but what I had witnessed that night was not from this planet."
And that was the same time that the police.
So, like, this is happening at the same time that the police officer saw what he saw, but it's 10 miles north of where the officer was. So in the sky, I don't know.
I wonder
That
if it's
might
the
be
same craft, though, because it could just be at a
moving.
focal point, right?
Yeah.
Moving.
They're not saying that in the same instance, I think
Right.
just within a same
Okay.
time period is what I'm guessing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then we don't have the name of this person.
Okay.
They said one witness saw the craft had moved up the Taconic Parkway. So again, on this parkway, in a Z pattern. He described the object as being triangular in shape with 30 to 40 colored lights along the back edge. And this person said, quote, "If there is such a thing as a flying city, this was a flying city."
Wow. Okay.
So I'd imagine like it looks like buildings with a bunch of lights.
Yeah, you
Is
know,
what I'm guessing.
kind of reminds me of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know, that part where it flips over and they have all that
All the
city
lights.
stuff. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I mean, when was that movie made? Would it have been made after this?
Yeah, it was. Well,
After 82, 83?
no, I think that was filmed very mid to late 70s. So I think that came out in like 80, maybe 81. So
Imagine watching that movie and then when this happened to you.
no,
That's creepy.
it is creepy.
So on the Taconic Parkway, people pulled over to watch this object as it moved slowly on its path. One observer estimated it was as large as an aircraft carrier.
Okay,
That's
so that
huge.
yeah.
Now, you know about that.
Yeah, yes, I do. So I can tell you that the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, because I've spent way too much time on one, is about the length of 3 football fields. So
That's huge.
That's no small craft.
No.
And for something to stay airborne, that's that size. I mean,
And just to be sitting there.
right,
quietly.
with no noise.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So over 300 calls were received this night, and the
bet.
object cruised over the community of Yorktown as well. And the police switchboard was so full of reports that they became concerned that they wouldn't be able to take any emergency calls because people were just
Sure.
calling in about seeing this.
Tying up all the lines, yeah.
So this officer, William Wolf Jr., was the dispatcher on duty that night.
Okay.
And his quote is, "Every line kept going, every single line, constantly answering the phone. Another line would light up. I'd answer the next line, and another one would light up. I got to the point that the county parkway stopped. The people were out in their cars. It was starting to get really crazy. I tried calling the cops to find out if they saw anything, and the only one that called, Kevin, said that he would stop in." Obviously, back then they don't have cell phones. But
Right.
he's probably talking about over the radio.
Sure.
I want to clarify that
Well, yeah.
for any younger listeners that forget that we didn't have cell phones back then.
Well, not only
So he was calling over the radio.
yeah,
basically.
and not only that, I know that some of our listeners that are younger don't understand how kind of how telephones worked back then. You had a line, and then if you were, something like a police station or a fire station, you had multiple lines going in. So for it to tie that much up, they absolutely were concerned that they probably wouldn't get any emergency calls because you would get what they
Yeah.
call a busy signal. Now, I know a lot of you younger people don't know what that is, but it's annoying when you got it.
Yeah.
So
You're not getting through at
you're
all.
not getting
Mhm.
through. Wow.
One of the most striking reports that the group gathered was from guards at the Indian Point nuclear plant. Now, this one's interesting. So they're talking about the investigators,
Okay.
this group. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the UFO apparently hovered over an active nuclear reactor for a few minutes, coming as close to the reactor dome as like 30 feet.
Ooh, that's scary.
The security supervisor even considered ordering guards to shoot it down, which good luck with that.
Yeah.
One guard described it as being the length of 3 football
Oh, there
fields,
you
what
go.
you just
That's
said.
exactly what yeah. So it is a carrier size. Yeah, that's really intelligent. Let's shoot down something that's stationary and have it fall
Well.
into a nuclear reactor.
Yeah. But I mean, like our guns are probably going to do anything.
No, probably not.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of taking that a little bit further. According to the New York Times article published in August 25th of 1984, officials at the time claimed the UFO was simply, this is what I find funny, was simple and cleverly executed hoax. Okay.
Mhm.
So to them, the only thing unidentified about the flying object was the culprit behind it. Anyway, alleging it was formed by 5 to 6 pilots flying in tight formation. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit further into that here in a second. But anyway, one officer claims that they had followed the V-shaped lights to a Stormville airport. Okay. There he says he observed a small group of small engine planes flying in close formation with their undersides painted black, perhaps to keep them from being visible from the ground. And then the aircraft were rigged with bright lights of alternating colors. Okay. I'm going to go on, but I'm going to state what I want to state about this. Okay. So moving on, a home video showing a light formation above Brewster, New York was taken on June 10th in 1984 by local resident Bob Pozzoli. I'm hoping that's right.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Philip Imbrogno was convinced that the footage was an actual UFO. And quote, it has been looked by a number of photographic experts who indicate that the movement of the object in the video seems to be one rigid object, not individual objects. Plus, there were hundreds and hundreds of witnesses who saw the UFO, and it said that it was something strange. But the night that the airplanes were seen, there were also a dozen witnesses who said that they did in fact see the airplanes. Okay, so here's where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit. First of all, two things can be true at the same time. Okay. Could there be aircraft out there? Well, sure. If you're by an airport, there's going to be aircraft out there. Could there be a reason that they painted their bottoms black and had a whole bunch of light? I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't matter. But here's what I can tell you. Number one, I have seen probably up until I think I left in 2006, but I had seen pretty much every military aircraft up to that point at close. And I can tell you right now, none of them moved quietly, singularly, let alone in formation. If you've ever been anywhere close, especially, 30 feet from a reactor?
Yeah.
If you've ever been close to a formation of aircraft, you know it. It is not silent. It is very far from silent.
Well, and here's my take. Why would they do that? I mean, okay, maybe some guys want to play a joke, but if these are military aircraft and they paint the bottoms of them black,
Which they're
don't you
not
think
gonna
they're
do.
going to get in trouble for that?
Yeah, you just don't paint it black.
And they're going to spend their off time just painting all of these planes? I mean, and how do you rig I just don't.
Well, you don't. That's what the answer is. And the other
Yeah.
part that cracks me up is that they have these multicolored lights. I can tell you have two colored lights in a military aircraft. There's green and red. They do not alternate. They blink.
There's no white.
There is no white. The only time there's white is when the landing gear is down and it's a very bright light to find the runway.
Okay.
But you're not going to see that, especially not in formation, unless you're like the Blue Angels, which you'd know.
So what kind of planes would that have been in the 80s?
Could have been F-14s.
For
what
Air
I was
Force-
in.
for
For
Air
Air Force,
Force.
F-15s. And F-15s,
Those are noisy.
extremely noisy.
Yeah.
I mean, they were fighter jets for a reason. I mean, they weren't meant to be stealthy. They're meant to get in and out of somewhere very fast
Drop bombs.
and drop
go.
bombs and fire
Yeah.
things. So there's just, I don't buy it. I do think two things can be true at the same time. Were they probably out there flying around? Of course they probably were. But do I think that's what is responsible for the V formation? 100% absolutely
No,
not.
and they could have been out trying to find this thing too.
Right.
And
that
it was
I buy.
and it was covered up. Like the military's saying no.
Yeah, that I buy that they scrambled aircraft going, holy, you know what? We gotta intercept this thing. And they went flying around. I don't buy painting the bottoms black though, because that's just it'd be hard pressed to do that. You just don't paint an aircraft,
No.
like that.
And when I was looking for all these, eyewitness accounts, of course the people are like, well, yeah, we did see planes at one point, but we also saw this.
Exactly.
And we could tell that these weren't plane. This was not a plane that we were seeing. So they did actually say they saw planes flying,
Right. Yeah.
but they weren't painted black. I mean, they clearly knew they were planes.
Well, and
so
and when you see a plane, I mean, most of us, of course, when you're, first born or just a kid, you can't decipher it, but most of us have been around aircraft. Most of us at this point in our life have seen them come in, have seen them land, have seen them in formation. You know what an aircraft looks like.
oh yeah,
I mean, even in the dark, like if we go out right now, it's dark outside, by the way, but if we were to walk outside, guaranteed there's going to be an aircraft out there somewhere,
oh yeah,
and you'll be able to spot it. Incidentally, you can also spot, because we have such a clear sky, you can spot the things that are not aircraft because they just look different. In fact,
like satellites,
right.
Yeah,
You know how sometimes we would see the satellites when it's going across, it's very stationary and it's one color the
Yeah.
whole way through,
yeah.
right? That's not what they're reporting here.
Well, it's not in the shape of a V,
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, trying to maybe play a little devil's advocate could,
Right.
but it's impossible.
It's too much of a complicated system
Oh,
to
yeah.
try to pull this hoax off.
And there wouldn't be any need to pull that hoax
I know.
off.
What's the point?
There
of
wouldn't
this?
be. It'd be, and incidentally, a waste of money.
Yeah.
Every flight the military heck, even every flight the commercial takes, there has to be a reason for that flight because of not just the cost behind it, but you're carrying either cargo, people, whatever have you. So it's not just some spontaneous,
Right.
flight.
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents
Yeah.
on that.
So there's one man that he's pretty famous for
Yep.
this whole situation, and I'm not going to go deep into it.
Right.
But he needs to be mentioned.
Yeah. In fact, you heard his voice at the very beginning of
Yeah,
the show.
the very beginning.
Mhm.
So his name is Whitley Strieber,
Mhm.
and he actually wrote about his experience in
Yeah.
his book, which is called Communion.
Which
Okay,
they
so
also
you can
made a
actually-
movie about, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And look at that. Read it, watch it,
Yeah.
whatever. But apparently, him and his wife had bought this cabin in the western edge of the Hudson Valley.
Mhm.
And in December of 1985, he woke up in a room in the middle of the night, and the room had 2 different types of figures looking back at him.
Mhm.
So he's saying like 2
2 species.
species. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like they don't look the same.
Yep.
Okay. And one of them was kind of skinny with big black eyes, and the other was these dark blue short figures.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I've never heard the dark blue
Yeah.
before.
I've heard mantis and other ones, but dark blue is new to me too.
He said that he then heard a voice say, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" And he said he didn't realize that he had been screaming at the time, and then realized he was like just, and then he doesn't remember anything after that. And the next morning he woke up confused with no understanding of what had happened to him. But then I think, things start to come back to him eventually after this. And
Right.
you know more about that.
So I think he went through some hypnosis, of course, which brought some of this out. And his story is, look, there's there's a lot of people out there that I give a lot of credit to when it comes to alien abduction, and there's some that are just like, I don't want to discount anybody's, incident, but it's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard, especially as somebody who's a big fan of ufology and of the paranormal, but I'm also very grounded and just trying to decipher that Occam's razor and things. But there are a couple that will, probably till the day I die, will always define my capability to do that. One is Travis Walton, and the other one is Whitley Strieber. And the reason for that is that they're both very credible. Okay. So in Whitley's case, he's a very well-known author. Okay. And you can tell if you ever watch some of the interviews with this guy, he doesn't really want to be a part of this.
No.
He's a reluctant observer in the beginning when Communion came out. Now, subsequently, he's got a lot of great books that have to do with it, but you write what you know. The guy went through a traumatic thing, right?
It's his process of, basically, it's his therapy.
Yeah, it's exactly his therapy.
And I would imagine the same is true for Travis Walton. I mean, it's the only way he was able to go on living is to talk about it
and rationalize it.
Yeah.
But his story is really interesting, and I don't want to take away from that, because you guys really should either watch the movie, which I think has Christopher Walken playing Whitley Strieber, so it's just interesting to see.
That's interesting.
It is very interesting, but or read the book. It's so interesting, some of the parallels that he has with, especially with Travis Walton. But he's very vocal in what happened, and he's pretty open. So, and there's a lot of interviews on YouTube. I urge you to watch it. But to this day, he's still an advocate for what happened, and he tries to, I think, sometimes write and be an advocate for people who are people that claim to have been abducted and have incidences. So, but yeah, he's definitely a big portion of this particular Hudson Valley incident, because this did happen in the Hudson Valley during the time frame, and to this day, he's still very, very vocal. So, and what's great about us talking about him is not only is he the past part of this, but he's very much so the contemporary voice of this. Because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that's just the beginning.
Yeah. This is not an incident that, and when we started this, I thought it was just, okay, this happened in the 80s.
Right.
Oh, no.
No.
This stuff is still happening to these people currently.
It's extremely active. It is not it's not an in the past situation,
No,
and
not at all.
There's so many accountings out there. And I think what we did is we tried to find a credible source, and there's just so much out there. So we did what most people did, is we watched some videos and some movies, and a lot about what we're going to talk about came from one particular movie, and that was a Hudson Valley incident, I think, on HBO or Max, or whatever the heck they're calling themselves these days. But at any rate, let's transition to some of the current stuff.
Okay, so so some of this stuff is, I mean, you can, obviously think what you want.
Yeah.
In watching these people actually talk about it, it's really hard to discount them. Hearing it from our voices, you're going to be like, yeah, right. That's immediately what you're going to think.
Right.
But, I mean, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Basically. But our job is just to present it to you, and you can think what you want and do more research if you're interested in it.
In fact, you should.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend purchasing a home in the area, but
you might get a good discount on it.
Yes. So we're going to start with this man, and he's a UFO investigator, actually, but his name is Mark D. Antonio. Okay, and he doesn't live there now.
Surprise.
He goes back to do all the research and stuff, but he did own a home there at one point, and he said he woke up and he was laying in his bed and he couldn't move, like he was frozen. I know they have a word for that when it comes to UFO encounters, that this happens a lot. Like you're just frozen, almost like, sleep paralysis in a way.
Very similar,
basically. Sure. But then he felt like he was kind of floating, and then he saw this being in front of him, and it started moving a wand, back and forth underneath his nose. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then after that, he couldn't remember what happened, basically. Right. But when he woke up, he was face down in his bed, and his face was like in his pillow, like pushed down, but he said he felt like he was drowning.
Ooh.
Okay. And when he lifted his head up, he was basically, there was blood everywhere there, and he was drowning in blood. Yeah.
That's a way to wake up.
Yeah. He felt like there was something in his nose, like in his nostril.
Right.
You know, when you feel like something's there,
Yeah. I've had nasal surgery, and when you have it, packing in there.
Yeah.
And you feel that.
And he felt like something. So he went to his doctor, and they went in there and they removed this large, like, can you see that? Like that big around thing out of his nose. And the doctor was even like, that's the largest polyp, if that's what it is, but they really couldn't tell what it was. God. Yeah. And it was like the size of this guy's two thumbs put together.
Oh, I mean,
so some sort of tissue-like substance.
That is so
out of his
crazy.
Nose.
First of all, how off-putting would that be, number one?
Oh, yeah.
And then just to know that you didn't put it there, so
he thinks he was abducted, obviously,
right.
And they inserted something into his body.
Yeah. I mean...
so I would guess that after that is when he sold his home and left.
Yeah.
Hudson Valley.
I don't even know if he worried about taking a loss on that property. So,
but I think because of this, that's what actually led him to become the UFO investigator. So he wasn't previously, and now he goes back and tries to help. Because obviously he made acquaintances and friends that still live in this area, and he's there to help them. So kudos for you going back.
Yeah.
So this next guy, his name is Brian Bowden.
Yeah, on the show they say
Bowden.
Bowden. Yeah, it's tough to say.
But he's actually the Hudson Valley historian. Okay, and him and this other guy, which we'll get to in a minute, his name was Al Santarriga. But they were camping near this lake in the Hudson Valley, and they ended up seeing this orange light in the sky, kind of like a circle, like a sphere.
Right, a sphere.
Mm-hmm. And they kind of like hiked down to the water, I guess, and then like was looking up in the sky at it and pointed at it. And when they did that, it flew like directly at them.
Oh.
Okay. And it hovered over their heads. And he said that nothing happened after that. Like nothing happened. Like it just left. And when they started hiking back to their campsite, somehow they had lost 2 hours of time.
So they pointed an object.
They pointed at the orange light. It flew at them, hovered above their heads. Then they don't remember anything. That, the way he describes it is like, oh, it just left. But then when they turn around to go back to their campsite, they realize that 2 hours has passed. And it probably only took them like 10 minutes to walk down to the water from where they were. So 2 hours are gone.
So there's a time gap.
Mm-hmm. So then the next morning, he gets up and he goes home and everything. And, obviously he's changing and stuff. And he notices he's got bruises all over his chest. Like deep blue-purple bruises.
Like you got the what kicked out of him.
Yes. And then he like feels choked up. So he goes in the bathroom and he starts like choking. And he goes to spit up and he spits up this blue like phlegm.
Ew. I mean, that's not Jello shooters. That's just straight up nasty.
And he's like, what happened? So this Al Santarriga, which is with Brian, same situation. He says the same thing about what he saw. But when he went home, he noticed he had like what you'd have like a fat lip, like from getting in a fight.
Right.
Okay. And he felt like something was implanted. Now, he didn't say whether he went to the doctor or they pulled anything out or anything. I guess it eventually went away. But it was just like sore, like something had happened there.
Okay.
And then after about like a few years after this incident, he woke up in bed because there was this light coming through the window. And he sees these two tall aliens, as we gliding towards him. Okay. And in the next room, his daughter starts screaming, like screaming. And it kind of made the aliens disappear.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably like, uh-oh.
So, he's back in bed because he was starting to kind of hover towards the windows, like float towards the window. So he ends up back in bed. The aliens disappear. The light disappears. And when like him and his wife both run in to their daughter's room, she is apparently like holding their son's legs down on the bed, and
Whoa.
she's like screaming, and she's saying, "You can't take my brother. You can't take my brother."
Wow.
And so I guess the same thing was happening in his room. Like he was floating
Okay.
towards the windows, and they were trying to, and she was grabbing his legs and like pinning him down.
They're trying to get a 2-for-1 special.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
That is crazy. I mean,
it's not crazy, but it's crazy.
no, I mean, it's definitely one of those where,
so they're getting the father and the son,
right,
which is interesting.
And I don't know, we're going to cover a little bit more of this, but
we're not going
yeah,
to say
we'll tip our hat too much, but it is interesting and it'd be awfully scary.
Oh, yeah. So, next incident here.
Wow.
This guy named Bruce Balbach, I think, is a farmer. Okay. And he was just in his living room watching TV one night, and there was this interference, like, on the TV.
Okay.
Okay, making this weird, like, sound.
Sure.
Okay, so he gets up, he goes over to the phone, and it has the same interference on the phone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. And, he went back to his TV, and the TV came back on. And when he sat down and looked in front of it, like the program that he was sitting down to watch had already finished. It was like 40 minutes later.
There's another time gap.
Uh-huh. So he thinks possibly he was taken and brought back. Now, he doesn't seem to have any other memories of anything else happening or any physical signs, but he just remembers the tone on the TV and the
Interesting.
phone.
So,
And he described it as like a deep oscillating,
right, like a
type
gravelly oscillating
sound.
noise. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now, he has a friend. Okay. We don't have his name,
Okay.
but he heard the same sound.
So he's in the same area probably. Then.
Yeah. I think it's like a neighbor or
Right.
something. But he heard the same sound one night, and he woke up to what he described as a gray. So the aliens that, look gray.
The
and have
traditional
yeah.
almond eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was standing next to his bed. And then something happened in the field with the man's horses. And it caused some kind of disturbance. And I don't know exactly what happened, but it kind of, I think, drove the horses kind of crazy. They hadn't ended up putting the horses down.
Oh, man. Oh,
so
that's terrible.
maybe, they got so frightened that
Sure.
they injured themselves, or that happens a lot with horses. If
Right.
They get too scared. And apparently in this man's field, so I'm guessing he's a farmer as well.
Sure.
It left a burn mark in the field.
Tangible evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So we got more.
no, I don't doubt it.
Okay. So there's a man named Patrick Jackson, and he's also a UFO investigator based in England. Okay. That they spoke to this guy.
Okay.
Okay. About why he thinks that these, abductions and stuff, are coming in.
Kind of
he
root
said,
cause of what's
yeah.
going on.
And he said they're coming for our genetics.
Coming
That's what
for
he told
genetics.
For our genetics. Now, we'll get more to that here in a little bit. But I just
Interesting.
wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
Well.
So there is a man named Jimbo Marzano.
Awesome name.
Mm-hmm.
I love that name.
And when this is from when he was like 5 years old. So he was probably, I don't know, this is probably from before the 80s is
Oh, sure.
what I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
Okay. But he remembers having nightmares. The room was spinning with lights and sound. There was like figures that he saw, and he was floated out of the room. He remembers a giant dark space with dark figures all around him. And everything's just dark. He doesn't remember exactly what they look like, just this darkness everywhere. And when he woke up in the morning, he remembered all this stuff, and it just kept happening to him over and over and over. And it's been happening all these years. I mean, he's, an older gentleman now. And like when he was a kid, he told his parents, of course, and they took him to the doctor, and the doctor told him to stop feeding him after 5 p.m. because he was having nightmares.
After 5 p.m.? What is he, a gremlin?
Well, they sometimes with young children, if they eat too late, it can keep them awake, and there's different things there. But and they asked this man, why do you think they keep coming back for you?
Right?
Because he says this has been continuing on since he was 5 years old. Like, they're still doing it to him, and he said that they are tracking people with the DNA that they are interested in. So that's the second person to have said it.
That is not frightening at all. No.
Now, this Jimbo guy's neighbor, okay, and she was very reluctant.
Yeah, I remember.
So I'm going to kind of leave her name off of this.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Just because, but this isn't, and she's very, very, very scared.
Yeah.
And I understand why.
Yes.
And you will understand why after I tell you this. But she's been having experiences since the late 80s. And she kind of lives out in seclusion there in the Hudson Valley.
Which is easy to do because it's a very vast area. Yeah.
But, there was one point she was hearing a humming sound, she said, and she saw these flashing lights, and she saw this, craft moving, and it dropped down into the forest. That's just like a recent thing. Okay.
Yeah, and when we were watching this was on that show. This had happened within a few days of these investigators going there.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is back in the 80s. This was, I think they filmed this late 2021, maybe 22. So we're talking about very, very recent.
Oh, yeah. Very recent.
Yeah.
So, but this is kind of hard to talk about because it's really terrifying.
It is, and she was terrified.
So she said that there was an incident where she woke up in her bed, frozen, like all the rest of them have said, and there were 7 grays standing in her bedroom. 7. Sorry, little Friends thing. But they were 5 foot tall.
Yeah.
And their eyes were round. And she said that when she looked into their eyes, it was like she was looking into space, and there were like stars moving around.
Yeah.
That, my skin is actually crawling right now just hearing myself say that. But like when I heard her say it.
Spooky.
And she said she was laying in bed and her arms were outstretched. So like out to the side.
Yeah.
Like if you reach out to the side and stretch out.
Right.
That's how she was laying in bed. Okay. And she heard, of course she was freaking out, and she heard a woman's voice say, "It's okay," in her name,
Right.
which I'm leaving out. "Nothing's going to happen. We are just replacing the crystals."
Right. There's something.
I don't know what to say about that, but yeah,
No.
but she said she looked down, looked down at her body.
Right.
And she said her whole like body was open. She could see her heart. She could see her organs. She could see that,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's when, so in watching this show, and it was on HBO, so it wasn't overly graphic, but you can tell just how petrified this woman was.
Oh my
explaining
God.
this.
Yeah. And she said after that, the next thing she remembers is like coming down a chute, almost like coming down a slide,
Yeah.
like an enclosed slide.
Yeah.
And she could see stars like all around her. Okay. And she hit the floor, and when she looked down, obviously she didn't see that on her body anymore, but her shirt was all ripped
Yeah.
straight through. And it just, yeah.
Yeah.
But the shoot thing makes me think like
That's how they're bringing her back down.
like
The beam or
portal or
yeah.
dimension or
Right.
something like that, because she could see, like, you know, in the movies when they show stuff like that, it's always you can see the stars on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, the portal thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
They think there's
Yeah.
a massive portal over the Hudson Valley.
right, and there are some people that believe, and some ufologists that believe that is how these crafts or these beings are
Getting in and out.
Yeah, they're getting in and out through portals.
Mhm.
I mean, there's even, and I know we didn't cover it on this one, but there are even some families that are having what you would call, quote unquote, paranormal incidences happening in their home, which most people would chalk up to probably being, maybe ghosts or something like that,
Right.
spirits. But because of how it's happening and where it's happening, they're thinking that potentially these are these aliens or beings or however you want to, whatever you want to say, coming through these portals into their homes or what have you, because of what we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a second. But yeah, so there is that belief about the portals there.
Yeah. So they talked about this on the show, and this is something that I had previously heard about and never really gave it much credit, because I'm like, what's their basis here
Right.
for fact?
Right.
However, after watching this, I mean, because and I'll go into it here in a second. So, of all the abductions,
Yeah.
globally, not just U.S., globally, 60% of abductions are with people with an RH negative blood type.
And that's something.
Okay.
That's just wild.
And only 15% people, 15% of people in the world have an RH negative blood type.
It's
Okay.
so wild.
So 60% of the abductions have that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge number if you think about it in that way. Like, if only 15% of the world has that negative blood type,
Right. And of that 15%.
and of that 15%
Yeah.
of the ones that are abducted, 60% of those.
Have RH negative
Yes.
factor. Yeah.
So that's just, now we're going to explain this. Okay. So the RH factor, it's a protein, okay, that is found on the surface of your red blood cells.
Right.
Okay. And if your blood cells have this protein, you are RH positive.
Right.
Okay. Following me here.
I'm following you.
If your blood cells do not have this protein, then you are RH negative.
Okay.
Okay. The positive or the negative part of your blood type, like if you were O positive or A negative, refers to your RH status.
Okay.
Okay. So most people have a positive blood type.
Right.
They don't have a negative blood type. So that's what they're talking about.
Right.
It's only 15% of the world
Which
has a negative.
by
which
and
is
large is
very small.
very small. It's still a huge number because it's a worldwide population, but for the most part, that is still a very small number.
Right, right. Now, we inherit our blood type or our letter from our parents.
Right.
Okay. So we also inherit the RH factor from them as well.
Correct.
Okay. So this passes down genetically.
Mm-hmm.
DNA, genetics. Remember that word earlier?
Yes.
Genetics, DNA. So each person has two RH factors in their genetics, one from each parent.
Correct.
Okay. So that's why I know. So when I heard about this, my grandmother, who is still with us, she's older, she's always told me about, she's got an RH negative blood type.
Right.
Okay. And when she was pregnant with my uncle at the time, I know they told them not to ever have any more kids because it's dangerous for a woman.
Sure.
Because it can cause a lot of problems. They can, deliver early and all this other stuff. So I remember her talking about that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if Granny's ever been
Right. The thing is, though, knowing
it's great. It's like it's so. And I remember her saying, "Well, yeah, the doctor said I had a rare blood type," and I thought, okay, but I never realized how rare this actually was.
I'm telling you right now, had your grandmother been abducted, she'd have kicked their rear.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So going with this, so scientists
Okay.
do not know where this Rh negative came from.
I did not know that.
They don't know. They've done multiple studies, they don't know where it originated from. Okay. So this has led some, UFO
Sure.
people
Yes.
or just random people.
Yeah.
They theorize that the Rh negative blood type was either in our past, with our ancestors, either injected, okay, or bred into our genetic heritage by aliens in our past, and it is why they are coming back to study it today. Now,
Interesting.
this is the part I had heard before that I just kind of was like, oh, come on, whatever.
Right.
But after seeing this, and here's the thing. They took these blood tests of these people that are being abducted in Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
And it was like a very high number of them came back that they were Rh negative.
Yeah.
They were Rh negative. So if you're Rh negative, don't go live in the Hudson Valley.
Right. Yeah. Be careful.
So it does sound, no, whether, kind of what they're saying is that either they've abducted our ancestors in the past,
Mm-hmm.
put this into them, and then put them back on Earth and are studying them like lab rats,
Sure.
basically. Or the other theory is that they have bred their species with our species, sent women back down to Earth pregnant with their beings, and are seeing basically if we can procreate together.
Right.
And seeing how the descendants, if they're healthy or whatever, and they're taking these people back and studying them to see. So,
It's
I don't want to say like
their stuff.
negative. Yeah, negative. Like if you've got a negative Rh blood type means that you're part alien. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying this is what some people believe.
Right.
They've
Sure.
got these beliefs. They've got this belief. It's very interesting though.
Yeah. You look at it just at surface level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it's an awfully big pill to swallow, right?
It is huge, but it is, it is odd.
It is very odd.
That they want to take, and for that one, they took the father and they were trying to take the father and they were trying to take the son.
Right.
That's weird to me.
It's interesting because even if you take the surface level of the fact that this is supposedly alien genetic mutations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really any different than what we do with some of the?
Well, no, it's not. That's what I'm saying. It's basically like lab rats. They're
Right.
testing, and they put something up that guy's nose, and then the one lady said, "Oh, we're just putting the crystals back." What
Right.
does that mean?
I have no. That's just.
You know what I mean? And like to anyone else, she would probably sound insane.
Oh, sure, yeah.
However, if which I don't know a lot about it, and we probably, should have talked more to Rissa Miller the other day
Yeah.
about, there's a lot of people that use crystals, whether they're, Wiccan or whatever, and they use them in their craft. But regardless of that, stones and crystals hold energy.
Sure, they do.
We have that, quartz, limestone, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Places that are built on top of areas that usually have more paranormal activity.
Yeah,
have their ghosts, have
very
their,
well proven.
So does it have something to do with that? Are they putting them in there to record something?
That could be.
I don't know. That's just,
It's
I'm
an
just
interesting
going
paradigm.
way out there.
It's wild. No, that's
throwing a guess, because that's the only thing I can think of. And does crystals mean the same thing to them as it does to us? Because surely if they said that, if she went to the doctor and there's crystals inside of her body, they would see that. So does it mean something different? I mean, we don't know.
Well, here's where here's where I'm going to throw my biggest nerd hat on possible, right?
Okay.
Get ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So we talk about crystals and aliens, right?
Yeah.
What about one of the
skull? So
well, no, not just that. About? Well, okay. That yes, but the greatest alien story ever told, Superman. He came down and
all right, now.
I'm just saying. I'm just trying to throw it out there, you know. That thing he had a crystal, you know, Fortress of Solitude. All his recordings were on crystals.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, true.
It's interesting, you know.
We could use a little Kal-El right now, I think.
Kidding. So,
but I mean, I have my nerd hat on too because I know his name. So
Kal-El. Look at that, Kal-El. Guys. Kal-El. All right. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, and technically he would be an alien.
Yes, he would be. Absolutely an alien.
Isn't that what they called him in the comics and stuff like that?
He was an alien.
I mean, yeah.
Anyway, guys.
People are going to turn us off now.
I mean, this whole incident says, I mean, this is happening to this day. You know, whether you choose to believe in some of this, that's entirely up to you.
Oh,
you know, that's kind of what our show is. We bring you the stuff. You decide what you want to, you know, what you take out of it. I can tell you this, and I'm pretty sure Nicole will agree. In watching these people talk, whether or not you believe it happened to them, they believe it happened to them.
Yeah. And there's too many of them to discount every single one.
Way too many.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, I'm pretty good at reading people.
Yeah.
And if they're lying, they're like the best actors and actresses on the planet because you can see the fear and the terror on their face. They don't want to speak about it.
No.
You know, and you don't blame them. I mean, they almost had that one woman had to be like, they kind of pressured her into talking about it.
Yeah, they kind of browbeat her into it.
Yeah, and that's why I choose to not say her name. I mean, you can go find it and watch it.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to do that.
I guess I shouldn't say they browbeat her. They were just trying to get information. That's probably wrong of me to say, but you could tell she was extremely
She did not want to.
Reluctant.
I mean, and can you blame her? I mean, that's a hard thing to talk about and to live with. You know, if that actually happened to her. How terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, look at all these witnesses and all these things. You know, granted, hers, of course, was very, very, I mean, horrific for her to see how her body was. I mean, we just talked at length about some of the things that would keep her up at night. But you look at this long list of people that have seen or gone through something in the Hudson Valley, and you just got to think to yourself, okay, there are a lot of UFO incidences out there where they're one-offs or these single incidences, and there's not a lot of repeat things. There's a few places like in Florida, like Gulf Breeze and some other place where there's repeat sightings, right? Mm-hmm. But nothing to this caliber.
No.
I mean, it's just...
I think it's like the number one.
Yeah, it is the number one.
In the world, because of so many witnesses and so much data and all this other stuff that they have on it. And the fact that it's not just like this happened at this time and now it's done. Like it has been continuing since, well, and obviously it's happened before the 80s, but
right.
I mean, the first real big thing that happened was in the 80s. And I mean,
yeah,
that's a long time.
It's a long time. And that's just in recorded history. We don't know.
Right. We don't know what happened before. And, they've also got talking about the sounds coming up from underneath the ground. I mean, what is that?
That's just scary stuff is really what that is.
Yeah.
But listen, guys, I mean, we could keep going on because there's even more witnesses than even what we've covered. Mm-hmm. So again, this is one of those where you just kind of got to take it in stride. Tell us, by all means, leave us comments. You can. You
live in the Hudson Valley and
you
need to talk to someone. We will listen to your story.
You bet.
We don't have to record it. We don't have to tell anyone.
No.
You just need someone to talk to, because that's significant.
Yeah, and that goes for really anything.
Yeah.
You know, if you guys need to reach out to us, we're at info@gxparanormal.com. But yeah, absolutely. If you're in the Hudson Valley and you have other instances you'd like to talk about, by all means, reach out to us. We don't necessarily need to record you or
No.
anything else. It can just be by email or however you want to do it. But
if you want to tell your story as
Yeah.
well, if you want it out there, we're willing to help you do that.
jump on in.
Yeah, because I think it is a very cathartic thing, like Travis Walton and
Whitley Strieber.
Whitley Strieber. I mean, it's in a way a sort of therapy that they can get out there and meet other people that this has happened to,
Right.
and they can tell people their story, and they know there's going to be a lot that don't believe them, but
Right.
talking does help.
It sure
Therapy
does.
does help.
Mhm.
It does help.
Absolutely.
And that's just a form of it. And it'll help you maybe get through the day, get through the month, get through the year, you know?
Yeah. I mean, folks, I can't say any better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, so glad to have you with us again. You know, we're excited. Got a couple of really great shows lined up. So be on the lookout for those. But other than that, hey, you guys, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Check us out at our Facebook at Generation X Paranormal Podcast. Our website, gxparanormal.com, should have pretty much everything we have as far as events and upcoming things regarding the podcast. And if you'd like to reach out to us directly, our email is at info@gxparanormal.com. Thank you and have a nice day.